In this tutorial, I want to show you how you add draft to faces of parts. Um, First thing I notice is the orientation of this part is kind of off. If I look here, my top view, if you look at my view cube, top is, Z is pointing up in the top. That would be the direction that I want the draft angle to be measured from. It's also the same direction for 3D printing. If I was going to 3D print this part, I would want Z pointing to the top of the printer. Now I could also change this in the 3D print commands to change orientation, but I prefer to do it right here in the model. It's very easy to do in synchronous mode as I just wait for quick pick, just hold my mouse still, I see the three dots, right click, select the entire design body. At this point I want to disable my design intent. Everything is selected that I want to move, so I don't need to rely on design intent. And so I just turn it off. That just ensures it's not going to go and try and find relationships. I want to rotate that 90 degrees from its current position. I see my steering wheel is actually in the correct position, just not in the right location. So if I hold the shift key and click on that blue ball, by holding the shift key, it won't change orientation as I touch key points. You also want to make sure that your key points are turned on. I have mine set to all, so it'll find endpoints, midpoints, and centers. And I want to put it right on the coordinate system, right at the origin. When I see that endpoint, I can click. Now I'm ready to start my rotation. I click on the torus of the steering wheel, and I want to rotate it in this direction. So I see in my preview there the value, the angle value, that's a negative number. So I'm going to type in minus 90. Maybe a positive for you depending on the orientation of your steering wheel. And then I'll just right click to accept it and click escape. All right, so now that's in the correct orientation. Z is pointing up toward the top, which is the way that I want. That's the way my draft is going to be measured. Now, the next thing is I see this part has a lot of rounds on it, and it's going to make it difficult to pick the faces that I want to add draft to. So I'm going to remove those rounds. As a general rule, for treatment features like rounds or draft angles that you're going to put on at the end, I always put those on in ordered mode. Then it's much easier to change your selection. If you have to go back and add a face or remove a face, it's easy to do with the ordered mode. So I'm going to use ordered mode to do that. But first of all, I need to get rid of the rounds that are already there, and I'll add them back at the end. So to get rid of them, I'm going to go to the Home tab here. I want to go to the Select tool. Underneath the Select tool is Selection Manager. I also see there's a shortcut for that called Shift Spacebar. So Shift Spacebar puts a little green plus sign next to my cursor. If I go touch one of those rounds, click on it, here's the Selection Manager. I want to find everything that has an equal radius. So that small radius, Shift Spacebar again to get out of Selection Manager mode. And then I'm going to click the delete key. I want to remove those rounds. I see there's more rounds on the outside, so shift spacebar, click this outside one, find those that are equal radius. Now what I see here is there also are some rounds in these corners. I want to keep those. So what I'm going to do then is I am going to tap my space bar 2 times so that I can remove those rounds. By going into minus mode, it can't select faces. So it's much easier to make sure that I don't select something I don't want by going into the minus mode. I'm just removing these rounds inside the pockets. All right, so I got them all. So those are the rounds I want to remove. So I just click the delete key. And there we go. All right, so now if I think about how I'm going to mold this part. So from this side of the mold, from the top side of the mold, I'm going to have steel go down into these pockets to mold this. Okay, and then from the bottom side, I want the rest of the part, the entire part, the parting line is going to be here at the top. I want the entire bottom half of the part to be down inside of some steel. And I want pins that are going to stick up through those holes. And that's just going to ensure that it sticks to that side of the mold, the ejection side of the mold, which is from the bottom. Okay. All right, so the first thing I want to do is add the draft in the pocket. So I'm going to go to the draft command. Before I do that, remember I said I want to be in ordered mode. So I'm going to right click, transition to ordered. Now I'm in ordered mode. Now on the Home tab, here is the draft command. So you pick a face, you pick the faces you want drafted, give it a direction, and it drafts them. So that's what we're going to do. So we want to pick the top face as our draft plane. The faces that we want to draft are the ones in the pocket. So on all 6 of these arms, I'm going to pick the faces in the pocket. So the outside ring, this one, and then even the faces inside this area of the pocket I also want to add. So it's pretty quick using the chain selection to just walk around the part and select those faces. So those are all the faces that I want to draft from this side of the part. Wait a minute, I missed the pocket inside, so let's add that. Let's get this inside pocket as well. There we go. And one more. Alright, so there we've picked all the faces that are in the pockets. I'm going to add a nice big draft of 5 degrees. I'm going to accept it. Shows me which faces are going to be drafted. I'll click next, and then on one of the edges is going to give me a direction arrow. Now depending where I put my cursor is which way it's going to draft. I want it to draft in this direction. I want it to get smaller as it gets down into the pocket. So at that point I just click and it adds 5 degrees of draft. Okay, it shows me my 5 degrees in the direction. Okay, if you can't really see that, you might want to go to a side view so you can make sure the draft's in the correct direction. You could also go to a wireframe mode. If I go to view, click on this visible and hidden edges. If I zoom up, you can see the draft angles are in the correct direction, which is what we want. Alright, the outside faces are going to be drafted in the other direction. So the draft is going to come from this side, but I want the part to get larger on the opposite side. So let's go ahead and add draft from this side. So we'll start the draft command again. This time we're drafting from this side. We're going to chain all of these edges. And I also want to add draft to the pins. I'm going to purposely leave out the center one because I want to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Next, the direction of the draft. It wants to get larger because this is representing down in the steel. So I'm going to go in this direction, and there's my 5 degrees of draft. Now because these holes are inside those faces, they're going to draft in the opposite direction. An easy way to tell also is to maybe I'm going to go to a bottom view here. And if I can see the edges, like this case, I can see the edges, and I can also see the edges inside the hole, which tells me those are drafting in the same direction, or from the same side. Okay. So now we're ready to check our part to make sure our draft angles are all correct. So we can go to the Inspect tab, and we have this Draft Face Analysis. I'm going to go to the settings first. I have my smallest draft angle set to 1 degree. So if it's 1 degree or less, it's going to show up in a cyan color, telling me I have probably too small of an angle. I need to add a draft to that face if I see anything that's cyan. If I see anything that's red, it's a negative draft, or the ejection side of the mold. The positive faces would be the injection side of the mold. Anything that's a vertical face that has no draft is going to be green. And if it has a crossover face, it's going to be this dark blue. So, alright, so now we want to see what we got. We're going to click Show. And so I see that all these faces are yellow, which is good. If I had a face in here that was red, that would be bad. If it's inside the yellow, that means that it's drafted in the wrong direction. Okay, so everything from this side is red. Everything coming from this side is yellow. Green is vertical. We forgot to add draft to the pin. So again, being in ordered mode, it's very easy then to go back to where we added that, and we'll edit that feature, and we'll go back to our select step and add that green face into the select step. was added, and now it's also going from the correct direction. Alright, so let's go ahead and turn off our inspect here. Let's turn off the draft angle analysis, and let's add our rounds back on. So this is also fairly easy in that first of all, I'm going to add the outside rounds. So I'm going to add the round to the outside edges first. This is going to be a, let's go with 1 millimeter. There we go. So let's add a 1 millimeter round to these edges. And also to these edges. Perfect. So then we have our large rounds. Now the rest of it, we're gonna cheat. So we're gonna change our selection mode. So we're gonna add another set of rounds, and we're gonna go to all fillets. And we're gonna make those 0.25, which is what it was before we removed them. If I pick all fillets, it's gonna find all of the inside edges. Okay. And then if I go to all rounds, and click the same part, it finds all the outside edges. Let's make them a little bit bigger. Let's go with 0.5. So they're a little larger so you see them. Now it's adding them here as well. So we need to see here. So if we think about how this is going to be, well, let's just go ahead and accept it, and then we'll see what happens. Alright, so I have this part all rounded. Now let's go back to our analysis. And if I go to my Inspect tab and I turn on my draft face analysis, I can see that some of these faces are blue. Why are they blue? Well, that's a crossover face. You can see it's at the intersection of a negative draft and a positive draft. So at some point it's going from positive to negative. So those are crossover faces. You don't want to have crossover faces typically, because that makes it very difficult to find the parting line, or create the parting line. So what you want to do is you want to remove the rounds where there is a crossover face. Okay, so I really didn't want rounds on this side, because I want that to be a sharp corner or sharp edge where those meet. Okay, so I may need to go and remove some rounds. So I'm going to leave the color on so it's very easy and obvious which ones I need to get rid of. So what I'm going to do is go in and I'm going to edit my selections. So the first set of rounds here, we'll edit those. Okay, if I see which edges are selected. So I don't want any of the edges on the top face. So I'm going to go to face. And I'm going to hold my control key so it deselects any edge related to the top face. Okay, and you see what happened is it changed it to a small round, and that's because of the method that we used to find all fillets. So those now became fillets. So we need to go back again, and we're going to go in here to the rounds, and we're going to edit the next set of rounds because it's in ordered mode. And we're going to go to our selection, and we need again to deselect edges. So I'm going to hold down my control key. Deselect these chains of edges. You see the blue going away. We also don't want it on these holes. So I need to deselect those edges. One more. Or actually two more. There we go. Alright, so we've deselected those. looks pretty good. And finally, we have some rounds down here we need to get rid of as well. So let's go back into the round, and we're going to edit those. Go to the selection, hold the control key down, and just chain those edges as well. Wrong one. Let's go there. Let's deselect by chaining these edges. A little bit tedious, but again, you don't want to have crossover faces because it's very difficult to create the parting line kind of in the middle of those rounds. So I think I got rid of this round. I didn't mean to. Add him back. There we go. All right. So now I don't have any blue faces. Those are all shut-off faces. They're called shut-off faces where the two intersect. And that is a moldable part now with all of the draft angles in the correct